All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking something absolutely fascinating, taking a deeply personal song about one man's life and translating it into a universal masterclass on psychological evolution. We're looking at the creation of The Warrior's Last Journey. But listen, this isn't just your standard rags to riches success story. Oh no, it's actually an architectural blueprint of the human soul. We are talking about an epic journey that moves through the pain of youth, the relentless, unstoppable drive of adulthood, and ultimately the profound peace that comes from just letting go. Now, this quote really hits the nail on the head and frames everything we're going to talk about today. Modern culture completely conditions us to view life as a straight, upward-sloping line, right? We think of success as an unbroken streak of conquests, degrees, and fancy titles. But this concept, which comes straight from the bridge of the song, completely flips that script. It tells us that the real goal of all of that external striving is actually a return to our internal center. The mountaintop? That's just a distraction. Your heart is the actual destination.
So, to really unpack this, we're going to map out the human life cycle through 5 distinct chapters. First, the epic of individuation. Second, wounded childhood and trauma. Third, the warrior's endless battles. Fourth, the hero's awakening and letting go. And finally, the return to the great mother's embrace.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the epic of individuation.
The crucial thing to understand here is that the source material explicitly identifies this journey as an epic of individuation. So we are shifting way out of pop music territory and into something deeply psychological. Carl Jung coined this term, individuation, to describe the lifelong, sometimes messy process of becoming who you truly are. It means you don't just bury your painful past, and you don't just blindly cling to your current victories. You have to integrate the whole shebang. The trauma, the trophies, the fears, the hopes, it all gets woven together into one complete, undivided self. I absolutely love how the source material uses music as a metaphor to explain the psychological shift. Imagine the soundtrack to this journey. It starts as this grounded, slightly melancholic, epic folk that really echoes the vulnerability of youth. Then boom, it builds into a roaring, drum-heavy symphonic rock phase as the warrior is out there fighting the battles of adulthood. But here's the kicker. It doesn't end on some massive loud crescendo. Instead, it naturally fades out into these expansive, peaceful nature sounds. Pianos, choirs, the wind, flowing rivers, birds. Think of those sweeping, emotional movie scores like Lord of the Rings or Braveheart. It's a massive, emotional landscape.
That brings us to Section 2, wounded childhood and trauma.
This is where the story actually starts. Early trauma often acts as the raw fuel for a lifelong drive to succeed. The lyrics paint this incredibly vivid picture, a child in a small village watching their father suddenly collapse. Then comes the long, silent years, softened only by a grandmother literally patting away the panic in the dark. The text describes shame falling like heavy rain on the heart. But notice the pivot here, because it's absolutely crucial. Those tears don't end in defeat. They crystallize into this nameless, unstoppable strength. The fear literally becomes the engine for survival. So, ask yourself, how often do our earliest, unhealed wounds secretly steer the direction of our entire adult lives? The kid in this story doesn't have some grand 10-year master plan. There's no strategic vision for a career path. There's just an overwhelming primal instinct to run as fast as possible away from the pain. I only knew I couldn't stop in sorrow. This right here is the birth of the warrior archetype. The child puts on armor, simply because they feel fundamentally unsafe in the world.
Moving right along to Section 3, the warrior's endless battles.
Notice how piling up all these academic and professional titles acts as a protective shield against that childhood vulnerability we just talked about. In the early years, as a student, he's flipping over endless mountains of books. Then he becomes a psychologist, learning to listen and carry the burdens of others, which, is often how the wounded try to heal themselves, by healing someone else. But he pushes even further, securing a PhD. The source actually describes this as adding more medals to his chest. And finally, he becomes a professor, standing at the lectern, helping young students find the light in their own eyes. It's a very noble path for sure, but it's completely fueled by an exhausting, never-ending battle.
Have you ever done this? Have you ever used a medal, a fancy degree, or a promotion to kind of plaster over a wound, only to realize that external victories just do not heal internal pain? The outer armor looks great. It's shiny. The degrees, the accolades, the lectern, they demand respect from everyone looking in. But the inner reality, it's completely untouched. The warrior is still isolated. He He is still fighting the ghosts of that small village and the memory of that heavy reign of shame.
All right,
slowing things down a bit for Section 4, the hero's awakening and letting go.
This is that profound, terrifying moment of realization. It's where the sheer exhaustion of overachievement finally gives way to the absolute necessity of inner silence. Think about it. You literally can't hear your own heartbeat if you're sprinting up a mountain or listening to a crowd applauding you. It requires a dead stop. In the source material, this maps to the transition toward retirement. It's that liberating but kind of scary moment when you realize you don't actually need to prove your worth to anyone anymore.
We are always taught that bravery means fighting harder, right? Gripping that sword as tightly as you can. Actually, scratch that. In this stage of individuation, true courage is the terrifying vulnerability of dropping the sword entirely. He puts down the endless fight. He drops the ego tied to his professional name. He lets go of the addiction to applause, and most importantly, he drops the need to win. Because as we saw, the need to win was just a survival mechanism born out of childhood fear. By letting it go, he is slowly, carefully placing his soul back into the center of the earth. This realization totally flips the paradigm of how to exist in the world. He stops fighting life and actually starts experiencing it. The source notes that he begins to look to nature as his teacher. He learns to be quiet from the forest. He learns how to flow from the river. He learns patience and waiting from the mountains. This is not weakness, guys. It is an incredibly profound, grounded strength. It's the strength of inclusion, which is way more powerful than the strength of conquest.
Which leads us to our final chapter, Section 5, Return to the Great Mother's Embrace.
So instead of trying to conquer the world, the focus shifts entirely to nurturing life and exploring new, interconnected frontiers. He embraces nature and travel, getting back in touch with the physical world. He dives into dreams and music to access the subconscious. And fascinatingly, the source mentions integrating AI and self-narrative, basically using modern tools to reflect deeply on his own story. All of this culminates in a massive psychological transition. He moves from the conquering hero into Jung's archetypes of the wise elder and the great mother. It's a complete shift toward feminine, nurturing wisdom.
And this brings us to a really beautiful realization. Everyone who has been hurt will eventually find their own gentleness, as long as they return to the source of life. He isn't just a warrior anymore. He essentially tells that warrior side of himself, hey, thank you for accompanying me through half a lifetime of wind and snow, but I am something else now. He becomes an old tree, providing shade, a long song, providing comfort, a smile, a lamp for other travelers. He's stepping out of the spotlight and becoming the warm glow that helps others see in the dark.
So as you reflect on this epic transition, from a wounded child to an armored warrior, and finally to a wise, nurturing elder, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder about your own life's current chapter. Are you still using your achievements to outrun a childhood storm? Are your hands tired from gripping that sword so tightly? Or are you ready to quiet the world down, listen to your own heartbeat, and learn the gentle, inclusive flow of the river? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable journey with me today in this explainer. Take a moment to reflect on your own path, and I'll catch you in the next one.